Hi, and welcome to SF Live. I'm your host, Christina Marie Flores. Well, tonight's guest, you've seen him on KTVU on the morning news. He's an author, an anchor, investigative reporter, and a political junkie. Please help me welcome my guest tonight, Mark Curtis. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Welcome to the show.
I was going to say people have also seen me on KGO radio too, but
they have seen you and heard you.
Yeah, you heard me, but didn't see me.
Very good, very good. Well, I'm going to start off by reading the first sentence of the wonderful book that we're going to be speaking about later that Mark wrote to get an idea of how you grew up. The first sentence, I was only 5.5 years old, but Election Day 1964 altered the course of the rest of my life. What happened on that day?
Well, it was interesting because I was in kindergarten at the time, and this was a year after the Kennedy assassination. So I was young enough, or old enough, as the case may be, to have some vague notion of American politics. And Election Day 1964 was when Lyndon Johnson was running for re-election against Barry Goldwater. And it just so happened that the kindergarten I attended was also the community polling place in Wisconsin. So school had to be canceled so people could vote. And I was excited to spend the day at home because I thought I could watch all my favorite shows like Leave It to Beaver and the Mickey Mouse Club and Gilligan's Island and all that. And lo and behold, I'm at home with my mom, and all that's on TV is news about the election. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have anything else to do, so I sat there and watched election coverage and newscasts all day long and got hooked on it.
So that's when you first started. Your mom, Mary Beth?
Yes.
Was it a political junkie as well? Did she?
Yeah, my parents were just, they were, as kids, when Walter Cronkite came on the TV, it was time for everybody to be quiet. And, David Brinkley and Chet Huntley and those old shows, in my mind, still seeing them in black and white. And that was a big part of the day. It's not like today where you have newscasts that are on 24 hours a day and it's over and over. And back then, if you missed the news at 5:30, you missed the news. You had to wait a whole 24 hours to see it again.
It was more ritual back then.
It really was. I mean, it was, talk about appointment television. I remember being in the car at the grocery store with my mom, and she's looking at her watch, and I was one of 7 kids, so there was always a lot of groceries to buy. And she's pushing the cart, and she goes, we got to go check out because we got to get home and see Walter Cronkite at 5:30 or whenever it came on. So it was a ritual.
Mm-hmm. And around the dinner table, did your parents kind of let the children know what was going on in the world, and you talked about that?
Well, we were one of those families that sometimes we left the TV on during the dinner.
Oh, okay.
And we would talk about current events. But yeah, my parents, they were very, very involved in the community, and news was a big thing. And coming from a big family, there was always something going on that became part of the dinner table conversation.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were a kid and you were out there playing cowboys or Indians, did you play reporter? I mean,
no. Would
you go around but your neighbor actually was on the news?
Oh, yeah. The guy who lived across the street was the anchorman at the local ABC affiliate in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, I was just so perplexed. You look at the technology and go, how did that... Wait a minute, he's about 6 feet tall and real. But how did they get him inside the TV set? And my dad was a pretty prominent doctor in Milwaukee, and a lot of the radio and television personalities in the city were friends of his and were patients. And so a lot of them came to the house, and these were larger than life characters. And I could, you'd hear somebody on the radio in the car as a kid, and you knew that voice because it was one of the neighbors or
cool.
somebody. It was just, I got hooked on the broadcasting thing very, very young, and I was just fascinated by it.
So what led you to your first job, and what was your first job in broadcasting?
Well, honestly, my very first job in broadcasting was dispatching police and fire calls for one of the suburban police departments in Milwaukee.
Okay.
So that was my first actual announcing job. And it was good practice, though, because you had to enunciate and project. And, you didn't want to screw up the police calls, okay? But my first radio job was at WMUR Radio, which was the radio station on the campus of Marquette University in Milwaukee, where I went to college. And that was, I'll never forget the day, playing records, and I was really a shy kid, and so I was doing a radio show, my first one, and I kept playing record after record after record, so I didn't announce, and then finally I thought, Mark, you gotta, sooner or later throw the on-air switch, you gotta go on the air and do the weather or whatever, the traffic or whatever the community announcements, and finally, a record ended, and I hit that switch, and the big red on-air light went on in the studio, and I started talking, and to some people's dismay, I haven't shut up since.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this has been 31 years now, so I love it.
Very good, very good. Now, what was your first job as an actual reporter on a story?
My first job as a reporter was at WUFT television in Gainesville, Florida. And I remember the first story I got set on because, you always worry that, something big's going to happen and you're going to be sent and you're the rookie reporting. You really don't know what's happening. And I got sent to a gas station in Ocala, Florida, where the clerk had been shot to death during a holdup. And it wound up being a serial killer that had been going on a crime spree, a guy from Kansas, of all places, went all across the country, robbing and killing convenience store clerks. And it was a huge story. And I just remember being there and the police and the crime scene and them hauling the body out of the filling station. I was 25 years old and I felt so unprepared and so, I just didn't know what I was doing. And then, sadly, there were many stories like that I went on, and a lot of those things just become second nature in your career. So
25 years old.
Yeah.
So immediately you're thrown into seeing not only a dead body, but
right.
talking about something that is just so horrific, just all of a sudden. How do you deal with that as a reporter?
Well, and part of the problem was one of the first, most immediate things is the lack of information. You're there, you're at the scene, you've got video, police aren't talking to you, and you're trying to cobble together a story without a lot of information. And so you learn to tap dance. That's one of the first lessons. But it is, and I mentioned I had worked at a police department prior to that, so that was good training because I had occasion to see, unfortunately, quite a few dead bodies as a police cadet and dispatcher, and you learn to deal with tragedy a lot, and that was actually quite good training to be a news reporter. Your skin gets a little thick after you see enough things in the police business, really.
And is there something that you do that traditionally will help you not get too attached to people that you're reporting on, just so that, because I'd imagine some of these stories are just so heartbreaking.
I had a completely different perspective on it when I became a parent. When you have small children of your own and all of a sudden you're thrust into a story where somebody's children are killed tragically, your heart just goes out to them, the empathy factor. There have been stories I've done over the years where it's been almost been impossible to go on the air because you think there, but for the grace of God go I. Yeah. And that's the worst thing you ever have to deal with, when somebody either kills or harms a child, and you just think of your own.
Mm-hmm. In '93, you worked for Cox Broadcasting in Washington 5 years as a Capitol correspondent. Daily live coverage of Congress, the White House, and Supreme Court for 8 TV stations. That was Clinton in office at that time?
Yeah, I moved to Washington, D.C. literally the day after Bill Clinton got elected. I won a congressional fellowship for news reporters, so I got to spend a year actually working in Congress and seeing how laws are passed and so forth on the inside, which was, for a reporter, is a great perspective, because we're usually, got our nose up against the window looking in, but we don't actually get to see the process happen. So that was fascinating. And then after that year was complete, I was hired by Cox Broadcasting, which is the parent company of KTVU and several other television stations, big media conglomerate, to be a reporter in Washington. And it was great. It was 5 years I spent there. It was fascinating.
And what was the biggest surprise that you didn't expect going inside and finding out how the inner workings are in the government?
Well, what's that old saying that people should never see how their laws or sausages are made?
Or sausages?
It's
I like that.
Look, there's a lot of horse trading that goes on, and some of it's pretty shocking. But you're trying to get a president or a Senate majority leaders trying to get legislation passed through Congress. Sometimes you got to go to key people and say, look, what is it going to take to get you to support the president's budget, or this transportation bill, or this health care bill? And sometimes a member of Congress will say, well, look, I'll vote for this, but I've got a tank company in my district that's might lose its military contracts, and if I lose 5,000 jobs, I might not get reelected. So can you help me keep this tank company in business, and I'll go for the budget. There's a lot of horse trading. I mean, it's part of democracy. People think it's unseemly, but it's the way it works.
Kind of like Monty Hall. Let's make a deal.
Let's make a deal. and President Obama's going to find that out too. I mean, sometimes to get, I know there were some promises made to those 3 Republicans that voted for his stimulus package. So sometimes you need the support, and what can you get? What can you give me? Do a little horse trading. It's part of the process.
Interesting. So you went from there. 1999, moved to Oakland to become co-anchor of KTVU Morning News. I remember seeing you there. And it's so interesting to see you right here in front of me, because you were on the box just like a kid.
For many years, yeah.
And I was making cereal and peanut butter sandwiches for my kids, sending them off to school. So
it was a weird transition for me, because I actually resisted it. The truth be told,
Why?
Kevin O'Brien was the legendary general manager at KTVU.